from origins to present-day insight. In this episode, we are going to look at measures to promote the Special Olympics movement.
We need to get rid of this social prejudice because they have really great potential and can make a positive difference in the world.
But before we speak of the measures, what exactly is the Special Olympics, you ask? The Special Olympics is a global organization that changes lives by promoting understanding, acceptance, and inclusion among people with and without intellectual disabilities through year-round sports, health, education, and community building. The Special Olympics has changed the lives of people with intellectual disabilities in 193 countries. One of these countries is Tanzania. But before we look at the country, we must first dive into where this all started. Founded in 1968 by Eunice Kennedy Shriver, pushed for research and programs that would benefit people with intellectual disabilities. She was the driving force behind President John F. Kennedy's White House panel on people with intellectual disabilities. For this neglected population, the years of indifference and neglect, the years of callous cynicism and entrenched prejudice are drawing to a close. The years of research and experiment are upon us now with all their promise and challenge. She continued this pioneering work as director of the Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Foundation. In 1962, she began an experimental camp in her backyard for people with intellectual disabilities, which continued throughout the 1960s. Her work eventually grew into the Special Olympics movement as we know it today, which launched at the first Special Olympics International Games on July 20th, 1968, inspired by her sister Rosemary. Rosemary, who was born with intellectual disabilities and was known to have talents in many areas, especially sports. One of her most frequent companions was Eunice Kennedy, her sister, who was 3 years younger. Rosemary was one of the inspirations for Eunice's interest in creating a better world for people with intellectual disabilities. Rosemary grew up during a time where people did not talk about intellectual disabilities. Eunice Kennedy Shriver jotted down the Special Olympics athlete oath on the morning of 20th July 1968, just ahead of the opening of the very first Special Olympics International Games. She recited them at a brief opening ceremony before the start of the competition. The words emphasized the importance of effort and trying for one's personal best. Let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. Nearly 50 years later, these words resonate with the Special Olympics athletes. Let me win, but if I cannot win, then let me be brave in the attempt. Special Olympics Tanzania is a division of the Special Olympics global organization that serves athletes with intellectual disabilities, working with hundreds of thousands of volunteers and coaches each year. Since the establishment of the Special Olympics, the number of people with and without intellectual disabilities who are involved with the organization has been growing, but the unmet need to reach more people with intellectual disabilities is staggering. It's at the local level, right here, where interested volunteers meet athletes. That's where the perception starts to change and where the miracle of transformation takes place. The Special Olympics provides year-round sports training and athletic competition in a variety of Olympic-type sports for children and adults with intellectual disabilities. Those activities give them continuing opportunities to develop physical fitness, demonstrate courage, experience joy, and participate in the sharing of gifts, skill, and friendship. But before the Special Olympics, Tanzania has had its own history and attempt at an inclusive education system. It is worth noting the first special education school in Tanzania was established in 1950, named the Wilson Carlisle School for Blind Boys. At the time, there was no teacher training college in Tanzania that trained special education teachers. Education for special needs education in Tanzania was started officially in 1972. Special education teacher training at the time was only for teachers in schools for learners with visual impairments. Teachers teaching learners with other disabilities were not involved in this training. In 1976, the Ministry of Education started training teachers for learners with visual disabilities and those with hearing disabilities at Tabora Training College. Tabora Teacher Training College began to prepare teachers for students with intellectual impairments in 1983. Recently, a few universities have also included special education courses in their programs as well. For example, the University of Dar es Salaam teaches introductory courses in special education for students who are enrolled in education programs. However, there is no degree program in special education at the university. The University of Dodoma introduced the Bachelor's Education Program in 2008. In 2011, the first group of 55 student teachers graduated from that university. There was no policy specifically targeting the education of students with disability, with most focused on employment. The policy states that students with disability should be educated with their non-disabled colleagues in the same classrooms, and that the book-student ratio for those with disabilities should be 1:1. This has not been easy to implement, to say the least, due to the lack of funds, as well as teaching and learning facilities. For instance, in 1980, there were 5 types of disability being served in 23 schools, a total of 1,125 students. Recently, trends indicate that there has been increased enrollment of students with disabilities in primary schools from 30,000 in 2011 to 37,000 in 2016. According to a 2003 article by Farrell, more than 3 million women and men in Tanzania, or approximately 9% of the population, have a disability. Meanwhile, the United Republic of Tanzania reports had 20 special primary schools, 231 integrated primary schools, and 195 inclusive primary schools, which form a total of 446 primary schools catering for children with educational needs in the country. According to Haki Elimu, in 2008, Tanzania has 3 systems of education for children with special educational needs, namely special schools, integrated schools, and inclusive education. Special schools are those which provide education only of children with special learning needs. On the other hand, integrated units are units for children with special learning needs, which are attached to regular schools. Meet Jerry and Joseph from Special Olympics Tanzania. Jerry is a youth leader as well as a sibling. Joseph is his brother, as he says, is one of his greatest teachers. His brother has symptoms of a condition known as autism spectrum disorder, ASD. And as a family, he says, they didn't really understand what was going on until about August 2012, when he was 10 years old, that he had that condition. He and his mother took a trip to India, where he was diagnosed at the time with what was known as just autism. He says, "We grew up in a time where information, technology, and even access to these things was just about as scarce and limited as the capacity to understand what these things actually meant." The term autism was changed to autism spectrum disorder by the American Psychiatric Association about a year later, in 2013. ASD is now an umbrella term that covers conditions such as autistic disorder, which is a developmental disability caused by differences in the brain, which leads to problems with social communication and interactions, as well as restricted or repetitive behaviors. But simultaneously, people with ASD have different ways of learning, moving, and paying attention. Now keep this in mind, because it is one of the many keys in understanding their utility and the means by which we can integrate them into society. But before we go on any further about this key, it is good to note a greater part of this effort is achieved through volunteers. This is Al-Muntazir School, where Jerry and Joseph enrolled. Here we have volunteered coaches and unified pairs. Unified activities join people with and without intellectual disabilities on the same team. It was inspired by a simple principle: training together, working together, playing together is a quick path to friendship and understanding. In a unified effort, teams are made of people with similar age and ability, an essential stepping stone to understanding the first of these keys, which is communication, which in most cases is achieved through forming a relationship in order to properly understand and utilize the benefits of being a unified pair. The inspiration, a sibling relationship, and has become a very successful model for those who've never had the chance to work with special needs counterparts.
They told me there was an event held by Special Olympics where they're gonna work with autistic kids, and I wanted to be a part of something like that. I saw that it was a good opportunity to do something good for the community, so why not? These kids are just like everybody else. They understand the same way, they function slightly differently, but that doesn't mean that they need to be denied opportunities that are given to everyone else. It was a very interesting activity because I got to see like what their interpretation of what I was saying was. Like all the kids over there, everybody was very creative, and like it was a dog. The picture was of a dog, but some of them drew cars, houses. They do different colored animals. So it was really good to see how creative they are and how they think. I feel like if everybody were like to think the way Special Olympics were thinking, and the cause is to be implemented in everyone's lives, then the world will be a much better place where everybody will get an opportunity to do something. We need to get rid of the social prejudice because they have really great potential and can make a positive difference in the world.
So I'm a senior at Al-Muntazir Islamic Seminary. My experience today has been like every other day, to be honest. It's been great. But most importantly, it's been peaceful. The one feeling I get whenever I stay with the children is a sense of like peace and tranquility. I don't know why, but there's something about sitting in the room with them and drawing and talking to them and listening to them and just being around them that has such positive energy. And it's amazing, to be honest. When I got here, the kids were already settled down, so it wasn't that hard. We just got into groups real quick. And Jerry brought this amazing photo that we had to describe. It was more like charade, but instead we had to draw it out, which was great. We sat with the kids. At first it was hard to get them to actually draw, because most of them didn't want to draw in the first place. One wanted to play a game, the other one wanted to play with blocks. The other one wanted to play video games. But in the end, once the papers and the crayons and everything came out, it kind of just like went into motion. And after that, we kind of just had to rush, and we didn't even know that we were going to stay or not. So all of us had like either tuition starting at 9, and we were here At that time, it was like 10. We were like super late, and exams are like really, really close. So like we're like super stressed. But we needed to get to those places. Some had to go home, some had to go to tuition, someone had somewhere to be. And it was exhausting. But then most of us ended up not going where we wanted to be. Some of us are here because like we're already 3 hours late. So we're not going anymore. I mean, for today, I'll probably say yes. But on the 18th, I'm pretty sure that I'm gonna regret this decision. But to be honest, yes. I think it's a whole lot better to stay here and be with the kids and this interview. But in comparison to like sitting and listening to one guy speak physics and that you don't understand, I'd rather be here, like, for real. Everybody's built different. And we have differences. But those differences make us particularly special at a certain thing that someone else won't be able to do. And in the world that we live in, as complex as it is, and as many challenges as we face, the differences that we have can actually enable us to figure out and make a better society for everybody else. And solve the problems that we are facing as society. It's very important for us to give the opportunity for people to explore their differences and enable their differences. A good example whereby actually exploring and giving a rise to these opportunities matters is, let's take Albert Einstein, for example. He wasn't exactly fitting into the ordinary or normal criteria. But if we're to compare him to everybody else, he was a whole lot smarter than a lot of us. And he basically brought about the solutions to many problems. He basically built physics. And if we were to give an opportunity to these kids and people like them, it would bring the rise, I believe, to a greater and exploring far greater aspects of life that we, as normal people, would never even imagine to go there. But also, the world is changing, and everybody in it deserves to be represented, deserves to evolve with it. And if we don't give an opportunity to these differences, the world will evolve more and leave out these children and leave out everybody like them. And that's a problem. We need to allow it now. We need to acknowledge them now, so that when we evolve and in the future, we'll have a world that's more inclusive and a world that has evolved into a world that every single person benefits from.
From origins to present-day insight, as far as what the future holds, the work has only just begun.